So, Dr. David, are you ready?
Sure, I'm ready. I was only asked to cover about 10 or 15 minutes, and I wanted to take a brief moment this morning to talk about winter supplementation and winter feeding. And one of the key issues that we tend to run into across that our livestock are adequately fed over the wintertime. Um, Most people are not in the habit of testing their hay, for example. They think in terms of buying tons of hay or bales of hay and putting it in the barn. And if they've got enough to feed out through the winter, well, then they've got enough, and that's fine. But the problem is that you can't tell what the quality of hay is just by looking at it, and that means that you need to test your hay. So you can take a sample of your hay down to your county cooperative extension office, and the easiest way to do it is to use a bale corer, a sampler, and some of the county offices have them. If not, they can certainly borrow one from the state office. The state office has several of them. And then you want to go randomly through your haystack and choose bales at random. It's important to do that because if you just choose the ones in sequence, you're really only getting one swath of your pasture or of the hay meadow that somebody was cutting. So you want to randomly select, and sometimes that's hard to do because you have to go dig into the middle of the stack of hay that you have. But it's important that you do it that way. And if you'll collect about a quart Ziploc bag worth of hay using that sampler, and take that down to the county office. Don't set it on the dashboard in the sun because that's going to do a couple of things. If it's just sitting there, that sun is going to warm up in the cab and it's going to pull moisture out of the sample of hay. So you're not going to get a good estimate on your dry matter. And that's going to throw off your calculations when it comes to feeding. And then also, sunlight bleaches out some of the nutrients. And so you won't always get a good report on what your nutrient quality is because you've bleached some of those out and you've changed the moisture content of your feed by just leaving it set on the dashboard. So put it out of the sun in a cool, dry place before you take it over to the county office. And I think that they're charging about $18 for a sample, and that'll give you a good idea of what the quality of your hay is. You'll get a report back that shows the dry matter content, and that's important because when we compare one feed to another, what we're really trying to determine is how many nutrients you're feeding the animal. The animal's body doesn't care where it gets water from. It doesn't care if it's drinking water out of the pond or if the water's in the feed supply. What it cares about is how many nutrients it gets. So if you have a really wet feed, like a silage type of feed, which is maybe 60%, 70% water, they won't drink as much because they're getting their water from the feed. If you have something really dry like hay, they'll get most of their water from drinking because hay usually runs 89 to 91 or 2% dry matter and only about 8 to 11% water. So we can compare that really wet feed to the really dry feed by looking at the dry matter content and what the nutrients are in terms of dry matter. So you need the dry matter, but then you'll also get TDN, which is total digestible nutrients, which is a fair estimate of the amount of energy in the feed. You'll get a crude protein estimate, and that's important. The animals need a certain amount of protein in their diet. And then you'll also get an indication of mineral content, which we generally don't worry about too much because most of us feed minerals separately in the form of a mineralized salt. But when you get that hay report back, you want to see that hay has at least 50%, and really preferably closer to 60% in terms of TDN, and at least 7% protein. Most hays in Arkansas will meet that, but not all of them do. In fact, when I first started raising animals myself, I had not intended to buy animals when I did, so I didn't have hay and had to buy hay at the very last minute, and there really wasn't much available. And so what I got was very poor quality. It was probably only about 40 or so percent TDN, and it was only about 5 or 6% protein, and I had to supplement quite a bit that year. So you need to understand what your hay quality is, what your TDN is. And let me see if I can share this here real quick for you. There's it again, share the screen, and what I want to share, there we go. If you look at this chart here, what you see over here, you see the size and type of animal we're talking about, and then the number of months since the animal is calving. So you have anywhere from an 1,100 pound mature cow, 7th, 8th, and 9th month of pregnancy, all the way down here to an 1,100 pound pregnant 2-year-old. So those are your coming twos, your heifers that you bred this year that are going to calve for the first time. And then, of course, up to 1,400 pounds and 1,400 pounds for mature weight. But then if you look over here in the nutrients as they are in the intake, you can see that really, if you're running about 60 to 65% TDN, then it really doesn't matter what class of animal we're talking about, as long as they're in that dry period, 7th, 8th, 9th month of pregnancy, which is typically where we are during the wintertime. If you've got between 60 and 65% TDN, you're meeting their energy needs. And if you look over here at protein, if you're running between 7 and 8%, all the way down the line, 7 and 8, a little bit over 8% protein, you're meeting their needs in terms of energy and protein. And those are typically the most important needs that you're going to have to meet. So if your hay has that, that's great. If it doesn't, then you're going to need to supplement. And so knowing whether it's an energy supplement that you need because you're not providing enough energy, or a protein supplement, and usually if you're not getting enough TDN, you're probably not going to get enough protein either. You may have to give both. That's going to be something that's important to know and something that's important to do over the course of the wintertime as you're doing your supplemental feeding. So getting that hay test is really important. And then for next year, because it's a little bit late this year now, everybody's already got their hay, but for next year, when you're buying hay, instead of thinking about how many bales you're buying or how many tons you're buying, you need to get that hay test up front before you ever buy that hay, before you ever start putting that hay away. You need to get that hay test up front so that you can think instead in terms of how many pounds of nutrients you're buying. Because the animals don't care if you're feeding them pine sawdust or if you're feeding them some of the highest quality alfalfa hay. What they care is whether they get the nutrients out of it. They're not going to get the nutrients out of the pine sawdust, even though it may be there. They will get it out of the alfalfa, but it may be more than what they require. So you may be overfeeding them. You don't want them to be too fat, but you also don't want them to be too thin. So do that up front. Find out how many nutrients you're buying rather than how much hay you're buying, and think of it in terms of that. You don't have to full feed them. You don't have to have feed in front of them all the time. They just need to have their feed every day as long as it meets their nutrient requirements. And then there was something else I wanted to say that just popped into my head and popped back out again in terms of feeding them and getting that hay test. And it's gone. So think in terms of pounds of nutrients that you're purchasing, pounds of nutrients that you're feeding, making sure that they're getting, there it is. One of the reasons that this is so critical is that as you go through the wintertime, these animals are pregnant. Once they give birth, they're going to start losing weight, and they're going to start losing it fast because they can't consume enough energy and protein to keep up with milk production. That's just the way livestock are. It's normal for them to lose that weight. The problem comes later on in the year when it's time to breed them back. If especially your 2-year-olds, don't come into the breeding season in body condition score 5, they're going to be much less likely to rebreed. So you want them calving and you want to try to maintain their weight in that body condition score 5. So they need to be a 5 or 6 when they give birth. Once they've done that, it's almost impossible to get enough nutrients into them to put the weight back on them that they need so that they're going to rebreed. And the number one cause of financial loss on a farm has to do with not getting your yearling, your 2-year-olds, your new 2-year-olds rebred. And, think about it from the standpoint that, Judge Larry, you've got your screen sharing on. You need to turn that back off again. So what people don't see is the financial loss of selling a 2-year-old. The amount of money that it takes you to raise a heifer from the time she's born until the time she gives you that first calf, that's 31 months. She's nearly 3 years old before she's ever made you a penny. So you've fed her, vetted her, taken care of her, managed her for almost 3 years before she gives you anything at all. And it takes about 5 calves to recoup all of that loss. So she'll be 7 or 8 years old before she starts making you a profit. If you have to sell her when she's 2 because she doesn't get pregnant again, that's an enormous financial loss that you can't afford to take. But it's an invisible loss because you're getting a check and it seems like you've made money, but if you calculate all of those costs that it took to get her up to that point, you're really not. So making sure they're in good condition when it's time for them to breed, by making sure that they get adequate nutrition over the winter while they're pregnant, is a critically important thing to do at this time. So make sure you test your hay, make sure that you're providing them enough nutrients to get them through the winter in good body condition, so that when they calve, they can produce that milk for that growing calf and still have the energy they need to rebreed. And that's really all I wanted to talk about this morning before we get started with Lavelle's presentation on programs that are available to you from NRCS that will help you to improve your farm.
Dr. Fernandez.
Yes, sir.
You talked about, talked about the hay. Could you comment on some of the supplementation material that they use? I know some of them use lick tubs, and then those lick tubs, they weigh 288 pounds. They sort of heavy, and then there's something smaller that they can use, a block or something.
Well, there are blocks available that are similar to those lick tubs. There are protein blocks available, cubes. There are range cakes that you can use. Personally, right now, I'm using a supplement called Bull Ration, which you can buy at the feed store, which includes cottonseed meal and corn gluten meal and a couple of other things. And my heifers seem to really enjoy it. It certainly has worked to help tame them down and recognize me as the guy who brings the feed instead of the guy they need to run away from. But there are a variety of things, and really what you want to do is look at it from the standpoint of cost. And that's going to start getting complicated if we're going to start talking about that, because again, you want to look at the cost per pound of protein that you're providing rather than the cost per pound of the feed, because some feeds have more protein in them than other feeds do. And you might be buying something that's relatively inexpensive, but also has significantly less protein in it. So that if you calculated the cost of it from the standpoint of pounds of protein, it might actually be higher. And I did a calculation like that a little while back, but I'm not entirely sure where I have that.
But what I was thinking about is a lot of these guys, they don't buy stuff in bulk. They just go down to the feed store, and I thought what they probably buy with these lick tubs or those blocks, because it's real convenient for them. They just want to put something out there, I guess, to have the cows to lick on, because it was convenient.
Right.
And a lot of the budget, they have this distiller's grain, but I don't know anybody in our area that uses distiller's grain, not in the small farmers that we're working with.
Right, and that's because distiller's grains have become very, very expensive and very difficult to get hold of, because everybody knows about them and everybody's really interested in purchasing it if they can. Let's see. I think I have that up. Here we go. All right. So let me see if I can share this with you real quick, and I'll try to explain again what I'm talking about in terms of purchasing your nutrients. And so, is this going to work? Here we go. So when you're looking at the cost, you want to look at the price per ton, okay, or price per pound if you're using pounds, in which case you wouldn't want to use that 2,000 number there. But if you're looking at the price per ton, you divide that by 2,000 times the percent crude protein. That's going to give you the price per pound, okay? So if you're just measuring in pounds, you just divide price by the percent, price per pound by the percent crude protein instead, all right? But this is on a per ton basis. So if you look at cottonseed meal, fairly recently, cottonseed meal was running at $265 a ton. So if you do that calculation, you can see, if you divide it by 2,000 times 46% crude protein, that's 28 cents a pound of crude protein, okay? But if you look at corn gluten meal, that's $412 a ton. So you can see, if you do that calculation, you get 44 cents a pound for your crude protein. If you look at dried distiller's grains, that's $149 a ton. So that's 25 cents per pound, okay? So far this is making sense. The lower the cost per ton, the lower the cost per pound of protein. But then if you look at soy hulls, they're $110 a ton. That's the cheapest in terms of dollars per ton. But look at what it costs you in terms of pounds of protein. It's only 12.2% protein, and so that makes it 45 cents per pound of protein. That makes it the most expensive form of protein that you can buy at this time, because the protein levels are so low, and on a cost per pound basis, you're spending an awful lot of money in terms of protein. So if you had a choice between the $110 per ton soy hulls and the $412 corn gluten meal, you're saving a penny per pound. And when you think about how many pounds you're feeding over the course of the wintertime, that penny per pound can add up. But you're much better off if you're doing something like dried distillers grains or cottonseed meal, where you're looking at 25 to 28 cents a pound, even though they're more than twice as expensive in terms of cottonseed meal, and half again as expensive for dried distillers grains on a per ton basis. The cost per pound of protein is actually lower, and you're better off feeding that. So when you're buying protein, you need to do this kind of calculation. You can do this at the feed store. You can look at the various protein supplements that are available and compare the price per pound of one to the other and determine which one is actually the cheapest one to buy, and then make sure that you're just not overfeeding it. And that tends to be one of the issues with things like the lick tubs. They tend to be really palatable. They've got molasses in them and salt that make them really palatable. And a lot of times they'll overconsume that protein that's in that lick tub, and they can go through them pretty fast. So if you can keep them from over-consuming, just give them access to it for brief periods of time, and then, maybe they can have access to it for a couple of hours during the day, and then kick them out on pasture somewhere else, and then have the tubs available to them again, maybe a couple of hours at the end of the day, and then put them away for the night. That might be worth doing, but you need to calculate that cost per pound rather than just put something out and hope for the best, because there's that old saying, and people often attribute it to the Bible. It's not in the Bible, but it's the eye of the master fatteneth his cattle. You actually have to manage the animals in order to make money at it. They're not just something you can put out on the grass and hope for the best, because if you do that, at the end of the day, over time, you're going to lose money in a lot of very invisible ways. It costs money to raise that grass, to graze them. There's a cost for the land. You're making a payment on that more than likely. And if not, your money's tied up in that land. You could be using it doing something else. There's a cost for feed. There's a cost for animal death losses, because that's an animal you can't sell. There's a cost for delayed pregnancies. The animals aren't going to have as much time to grow. There are lots of little costs associated with raising livestock. And if you're not going to be on top of them, you're going to become a high cost producer. And eventually they're either going to eat you out of house and home, or you're going to go out of business, or you're going to have to get a handle on those costs and become a producer who actually makes money. Or you need a job to support your farming habit.
Okay.
All right. Thank you, Dr. Fernandez. If there aren't any other questions for Dr. Fernandez? If not, then Lavelle Foots, who is our small farm program conservation specialist. He's a retired USDA conservation director, county office director, and he now is contracted with UAPB, and now he's our UAPB conservation specialist. And he's going to go over some conservation practices and that will make improvements to your pastures and hopefully improvements to your bottom line of your farm operation. Lavelle, are you ready?
Give me just a second, Stephen. I'm trying to load that slide prediction, and then I'll be right with you here.
Okay.
I'll be right with you.
Can I ask Dr. Fernandez another question then, since he's still here?
Sure, yeah.
Dr. Fernandez, I heard of people planting some winter annuals or whatever. But anyway, I know those are green. Somebody planted something that's green out there. And I know green feeding versus this brown hay feeding. What's the difference in that? You got green out there. Mm-hmm.
So I like seasonal annuals for supplementing your winter feed costs because they save you money in a variety of ways. One of the things, what we're talking about doing, and I'm talking about for southern Arkansas and places south of southern Arkansas. So if you're anywhere in the lower southeast, you're looking at typically a warm season perennial pasture where you've got something like Bermuda grass or Bahia grass or some of the other warm season grasses that are perennials. And Those are good there. Those are good for grazing during the summertime. They grow during the summertime. That's when they have their peak nutrient contents, is during the summertime. And as we move into the fall, they start to go dormant and they start losing their nutrient quality. And then, of course, there's nothing available for you during November, December, and then especially early in the year, if you're looking at March or April, sometimes even late February, there isn't really anything available for grazing. They're still dormant. They haven't broken dormancy. They haven't started to grow yet. If you'll use cool season annuals, and in this case, we're talking about things like ryegrass or oats or wheat or barley or some of the other small grains, you can plant those in your pastures, and some of them you can broadcast. Others of them need to be drilled in. And if you drill, you'll get better results. You use less feed and better results. But yeah, you may, if you're like me, I don't have a drill, and I don't have access to one, so I use a broadcaster. And what will happen is, if you'll go out in late September and cut some of your pastures back to about 2 inches in height, because by this time the warm season grasses are going dormant, so you're really not going to be harming them any. If you cut them back to about 2 inches in height, or if you'll graze them down to 2 inches in height, you can then go out and plant a cool season annual, like the ones we just talked about, in those pastures, and then leave the animals off that pasture. That cool season annual will start to grow, and probably by about December or so, you'll have enough grazing out there that you can graze your animals in December until the snow falls and covers it up. And then again in late February during a warmer year, and that's what's predicted for this year, or in March, once those ground temperatures get up to about 60 degrees or so, when it's about 60 or 70 degrees in the air, the warm season grasses won't have started growing yet, but those cool season annuals will really take off, and that'll provide you with some feed that the animals can harvest themselves. So now you're not having to cut as much hay or feed as much hay, and the animals are doing the work for you. So you don't have to get up and go out and make sure that there's feed out there. You don't have to try to keep it dry and out and off the ground. It's growing and it's green, and it's going to be really good quality stuff that they'll be able to harvest for you. And that's really the best benefit. You don't have to do the work. It's cheaper that way. And they're going to get a better quality nutrition that way. You can also stockpile at the end of the summer. You can stockpile some of your warm season and perennials so that they're available into the fall. And so, if you really want to know more about this, you want to look at the 300 Days of Grazing program that was put together by the University of Arkansas Cooperative Extension Service. But what you would do in August is you would allow your animals to graze a pasture and mow it fairly evenly, so there's about 3 inches of grass left behind. Move the animals off that pasture and now just allow it to grow. And you're going to allow it to grow until it goes dormant. And so that's going to be sometime in October. Then at that point, you can come in with those animals and you can strip graze that land. So if you'll run a piece of a single, with cattle, you can do this with a single hot wire of electric fencing, where you'll strip off maybe 8 feet. And you can calculate if you want about how much in terms of nutrients. And again, I don't have enough time to go into how to do that in this workshop, but we can do a workshop on how to do that at some point in the future. Or again, you can look at the Cooperative Extension website, the University of Arkansas Cooperative Extension website at uaex.edu and find the 300 Days of Grazing program. You can calculate how much forage is there and how much needs to be available for those animals for a period of time, and you can strip graze it. So they can graze that right down to the ground because those grasses are dormant. You're not going to harm them any. And once they've done that, you can then move that hot wire and give them access to the next patch of grass. You don't have to put anything behind them because, again, they've eaten all that off and that grass is dormant. So if they go bed on that, that's fine. They'll eat that next strip, and you can continue to strip graze across there until probably about November, at which time they will usually have either cleaned it up or it probably will have lost all of its nutrient value, and you'll be at that point ready to move into your cool season annuals, which should have had that chance to grow now and be tall enough for them to graze on. And you can graze those in a similar fashion until that snowfall comes and they stop growing and the cool season annuals stop growing. Then you're going to hay feed through December and January and maybe into early February. And then if it's warm enough, those grasses may have taken off again and you may be able to start grazing them again through May. The only problem with some of them is that they tend to be fairly vigorous growers through May and into June. And by that time, your warm season perennials are trying to come on and they don't do well in shade. So you'll have to mow that down. You can bale it You can, mob graze it so that you can get rid of that cool season annual, or you can herbicide it and kill it out before the warm season annuals or the warm season perennials break dormancy. So a variety of strategies that you can use there. All of them will help to cut down on your winter feeding costs and provide better nutrition for your animals over the course of the winter.
Okay. Thank you. And one last quick question. With those green grasses, do you cut down on your supplement? Do you have to supplement?
Typically, no, you're not going to have to supplement. Those grasses are going to be young and lush and growing fast, and so they'll be higher in protein, higher in sugar content. They'll have much less fiber in them, and the animals will tend to do very well on them. And then one of the ones that I hadn't really talked about, but that's really people are becoming very interested in or starting to use much more regularly, and that's forage brassicas. So things like forage turnips, and that's a very specific kind of turnip. That's not your standard root turnip. It's a turnip that is bred and designed specifically to grow tops and not a large turnip on the bottom. So you've got those, and they're very high in energy and in protein and very low in forage. So much so, in fact, that you have to really treat them as if they're a grain because your livestock won't get enough fiber for good rumen function. So you have to limit graze them on those kinds of forages, but they're really high quality and they can really cut down on your feed bill, but they do require a prepared seed bed. So you are going to have to go out and at least disturb the soil so that you can get good soil contact with the seed. And it's best if you use a prepared seed bed to get those forage turnips to grow. But there are several different varieties. Appin and Pasja, P-A-S-J-A, I believe is the way that's spelled, are a couple that have been researched. And again, I think that's part of that 300 Days of Grazing program that you'll see at the University of Arkansas's extension website.
Thank you.
Okay. There's additional information. Are you ready now?
Yes, sir.
Okay, now we have Lavelle Foots, UAPB, NRCS, retired NRCS conservationist. We're going to talk about some of these conservation practices for the pastures. Okay, Lavelle.
Okay, I'm trying to get to that program. I'll see that. Can you not see it?
Oh, I don't see anything.
No slide presentation yet?
No, not yet.
Not yet. Okay, let me get out of here and straighten it up. Share. Not yet.
Trying to come up, I believe.
Now you need to go down and click on, you need to click on the one that you want to share and then tell it to start sharing. There you go.
It's up.
Oh, okay. It finally made it.
Mhm.
Okay. Okay. Hopefully. What about now?
Yes.
Okay. Okay. I'm sorry about that. Okay. I'd like to say good morning to everyone. We're here to talk about, I've been asked to speak about the NRCS conservation program, a financial assistance program, conservation practice that can help with grazing land practice, a pasture planting, the cattle operations throughout our county here, throughout the state. I've tried to put together something. I've tried to utilize Jeremy Huff, which is our state grazing land specialist out of the state office, tried to utilize his presentation as much as possible. Some of these slides will look dated, but they are the most accurate ones I could find out there. So again, my name is Lavelle Foote, and I am a UAPB consultant for the University of Arkansas Small Farm Program. And as we get to it, if you got any questions, please do not hesitate to ask. First of all, for conservation financial assistance, the Natural Resource Conservation Service mission is mainly to provide conservation planning assistance to protect our natural resources. And they will work with you. And through this, they have a number of conservation practices to address your needs. NRCS provide producers and and service that enable people to be good stewards of the natural resources, water-related natural resources. That's the main thing. They have 75 conservation districts. They have 62 offices and 3 area offices. And this slide may not mean much, but at one time there used to be a field office in every county, and all 79 counties. And with all the different changes, now there are only 62. If one wants to find the Pacific office, the main thing is to contact your local office, the local USDA office, through the phone, or contact Dr. English's office. I'm sure they'll be able to help you, or myself, which I will be providing you with my phone number also. I'm not sure about the number of employees now, that keep changing. The conservation program, the main thing is to identify your resource concerns. This picture's an old picture. It's Ralph Harris, which was one of our main, I guess you might say, grazing land specialists. Ralph would come to your farm and identify everything that was going on. They would measure the height of your grass, determine how much you had, and basically how many animal units you could grow up on that particular pasture or that particular land unit. That's something we don't see in the agency anymore. Most time, most people are stuck behind a computer all day. Oh, why did it go? With that, some of the main things that they have out there to address your resource concern, they have some conservation programs. First of all, they have the conservation technical assistance, and that's the part where the field office staff come out to your field. They will help identify your needs, help identify what type of grasses you'd like to put in on the farm. And then at the same time, they will look at what other types of conservation practices that they may be able to assist you with, whether it be financial or technical, to address your needs. The main programs that they have in their arsenals that you'll be working with out of toolbox is the Environmental Quality Incentive Program, which we call EQIP for short. The next program that they have is the Conservation Stewardship Program. It's another program that pays some types of financial assistance for just being a good steward of the land. Looks like something left there. When you think about grazing lands, one of the things you got to think about is brush management. Brush management is a conservation practice that the Natural Resource Conservation Service pays financial assistance to help control the brush up on your farm. Another thing that you might want to consider is herbaceous weed control. And you say, what is the difference? Brush is more brushy-like material, and the herbaceous is just weeds growing throughout the pasture. There are two different practices, and they pay cost share assistance on both to maintain the weeds or the brush upon your pasture. And when you say, well, what's the difference between brush and what's the difference between herbaceous weed? This is what they would look at when they talk about brush control versus weed. And with these two different practices, you can sign up for both practices up under the EQIP program to help control both of the particular nuisance of within your pasture, pests. The other thing we have to think about is grazing land in that brush management and weed control. We have to think about fencing. Fencing is another practice that NRCS pays cost share upon. And there are two types of fencing that when we mainly think of. They have what we call the woven wire fence, and they have the barbed wire fence, which are more permanent fencing. But they also have some electrical fencing that we'll look at. Here you see a picture of the barbed wire fence and the woven wire fence. Both of these practices within fencing are cost shared within our CS program under the EQIP program. At the same time, they have, from a grazing land standpoint, one of the main things when you think about rotational grazing, maybe the electric fencing may be the most economical way to put in a grazing land system with rotational grazing. They have an electrical fencing system, which is a little bit cheaper than going with the barbed wire or the woven wire. And all of these systems, or all these fencing is cost shared assistant. They do provide cost share to install these particular fences, or types of fences. And you say, well, technical take home message. The key to it is cost comparison of electric fencing and the resources available. From a grazing land standpoint, and this is an old slide, but even today, I feel like it's still true. When you look at the cost for doing a electric fence, even back then, it was $446.28 for a quarter mile. At the same time, if you're going to do it for a barbed wire fence, we're talking about you would still have to buy probably, from looking at what we saw, everything, you would still have to buy a mile of fence wire and barbed wire. And that kind of threw me when I talked to Jeremy about that. But according to the cost that was always calculated, it was $933.25. So it's twice as much to put in a barbed wire compared to electric fencing. So it's something to think about when you think about your resources there. Oh, they begin to circle the price comparison there. Being the lower of the electric fence being much more economical to put in that type of system. Okay. And again, the comparison being the electric system is the most cost-efficient system to put in, and NRCS does pay on both. Move, please. I didn't realize we had so many quotes in here. One of the things you have to consider when putting in an electric fence is that it's very important that you put the rods in protected from lightning. And one of the things that NRCS will do, they will work with you to make sure that you get that electric fence grounded properly and provide you with the guidance and the designs to make sure that takes place properly. And this is what I mean by putting in 3 rods to at least make sure that that fence is grounded properly. And let's see here. More electric fencing. Move on from that. The other thing is making sure that you go by the guard and the designs that are provided by that DC and that technician. Because on any conservation practice that you're applying for from NRCS, they will only pay you if the practice is installed to NRCS standards and specs. Let's see here.
If I could say something, Lavelle, I want to emphasize that point you just made. That's a very important point that Lavelle just made about making sure that you install those practices according to standard. We had an instance a few years back here in our area where people were putting in fencing, and corner posts are supposed to be, the corner braces are supposed to be 8 feet. And when they went down to the supply store and bought their posts and came out and put their fences together, the posts were advertised as 8 feet. But it turns out those posts were only 7 foot 6 inches long, and people had to take those corners out and replace them with 8 foot corners because that did not meet standards. So make certain that you do meet the standards that are set, or you will not get your cost share.
So true. You're right, Dr. Fernandez. Very true. One of the reasons we're talking about fencing, because one of the most important things Dr. Fernandez has already talked to about the nutrient hay and also getting some winter grazing. But one of the most important things you can do is manage the grass that you have. And that really comes down to rotational grazing or some type of grazing system. And it all kind of goes hand in hand with your brush management, your herbaceous weed management, and your fencing to really make things happen for you. And therefore we get down to the word prescribed grazing. This is another practice that NRCS pays cost share upon. In order to do it, you can do it with as few as 2 pastures, but it's better that you have as many as 4 to really get the benefits of true rotational grazing. And working with that DC or that grazing land specialist, they will help you set up that plan for that rotational grazing system. Prescribed grazing, it managing the harvest of vegetation and grazing or browsing animals. And here you can see in this particular photo, they're utilizing one of those electric fences kind of to divide the pasture. And this is really where your electric fencing really pays off, because you already might have your outer fences or your perimeter fences, but you may be able to section your pastures off into sections and create that 4-paddy grazing system that we're talking about, utilize and get the most out of it. A person could go out there and put in barbed wire and set it up with all 4 pastures, but that may be something permanent that you don't want. I truly see the electric fencing as being a great tool to utilize and implement a great grazing system on anyone's farm or pasture system. The grazing land takeaways, the take-home message is understanding the 2 benefits of grazing management and resources available. That is, considering your rotational grazing to make sure that Dr. Fernandez mentioned earlier, making sure that those cows get that tender vegetation when it's available, and managing it with your rotational grazing system to graze that as early as you can so that you won't have to feed hay as early. The other thing, what have I got here? Here it comes. The efficiency. Why have I got a car in there? If you put in the permanent fence, yeah, it may look like it's great, but really are you spending up a lot of money and then running out of things? You can also use solar panels also in your electric fencing, as well as just hooking into a electric system. They do have a system that works with solar panels. Now I'll put the light bulb and turbine thing is here. This is something he added. The main thing, the more efficient you are, the more resources you save, and the less, and then you receive more input from your profit. If you're not spending as much hay in for feed, and you get more grazing off your pastures, you're making more profit on those livestock when you get them to the market because you didn't put as much into them. The bottom line. You need more dollars back into your pocket. Here's one thing that the grazing land specialists consider, and I'm not trying to sell you on the number of paddocks, but this is some of the things that they look at when you heard me talk about 2 paddocks or 1 paddock or 3 paddocks or 4 paddocks. Here's some of the things they look at. If you looked at a control continuous grazing with no paddocks or no breakdown of the pastures, you're looking at between 30 and 35% efficiency of those cows grazing your pasture. If you're looking at a system where you break your pastures down to 4 to 6 paddocks in that pasture, you're looking at between, with a 6 to 12 day rotation we're talking about on that pasture, in those paddocks, you're looking at between 40 to 45% more efficient grazing of your livestock and utilizing the grasses that you have. And of course, you can see if you go all the way down to a 8 to a 12 paddock system, rotating your cows 3 to 5 days, you're looking at 50 to 60% efficiency of utilizing the grasses you have on that pasture. And of course, the more paddocks that you have, 12 to 24, 1 to 2 day rotation. Now, I realize that could become cumbersome to rotate cows every 1 to 2 days. You may not even be living on the site at that time, but you're looking at 60 to 70% efficiency of the grassland if you're able to use that type of system. So you say, Lavelle, why did you go through all that? Well, the bottom line is, if you're going to be in the cattle business, you must utilize some type of grazing plan, some type of grassland management system. And when we use the word system, your system must include things like brush management, herbaceous weed control, some type of fencing system. You must consider prescribed grazing into your operation if you really want to be efficient with your grasses and not feed as much hay. And you must consider also some things like some kind of pasture planting. When I say pasture planting, I'm thinking about putting in some type of cool season crops, such as some clover or overseeding with something of that nature. NRCS pay on pasture planting, overseeding clover. You're not paying any longer on things like overseeding ryegrass because it's an annual. Not even if you say I'm planting perennial rye, they will not pay up on that. But they will pay up on interseeding clover. Now, when you say, well, why would I want to do that? Many of you know a number of your pastures need lime up on them. When they pay on that rate to interseed those clover, they calculate the rate in there for also if you need lime to pay for helping put that lime out also. Also for any type of fertilizer, so it's an opportunity to also help you from that standpoint. Again, message to take away, understanding the benefits of your lagoon. Of course, if you plant those lagoons, it's going to help you with the nitrogen aspects of that grass. Maybe many of you are not putting the nitrogen on your pastures, but at this time, the lagoon would definitely help any type of grass system that you have out there, but at the same time, provide some type of cool season grazing to offset some of your hay season. Here's a slide that kind of gives you an idea of the nitrogen, fixed nitrogen that applies to the different clovers, whether it be red clover or white clover. You can see what the initial values are from a standpoint, from a dollar standpoint. If you're looking at it, what does that mean if I do interseed these clovers? What do I really get out of it? What kind of benefits are there? And one of the main things you're looking at right here, you're looking at anywhere between 75 to 200 pounds of fixed nitrogen from red clover. And when you look at that, the value of it at 35 cents per pound, that's $26 to $70. So, you know, so when you look at across that table, you can see that there's a great value getting some lagoons interseeded into your pasture, into your operation. And again, this can be paid upon through the EQIP program with the practice of 5-12 pasture planting. That's all you're going to do is overseed some lagoons into your already established Bermuda or Bahia or whatever type of warm season grass operation you have. If it's a cool season grass operation, it too can have clovers interseeded throughout it. The added benefit to adding a lagoon, forage quality is the main thing. Again, not only is it going to provide that nitrogen needed to boost the production of your warm season or even your cool season grasses, the forage quality is going to improve greatly. It extends the growing season that we're talking about now. All of a sudden, if you got some cool season out there, hopefully you won't have to feed hay as soon or as early as you have been in the past. We're going back to that slide again. So where we're talking about brush management, herbaceous weed control, fencing, prescribed grazing. And I know you hear me hitting at this, but whenever you go in to make up a EQIP application, whether it be for forest land, row crop, or whatever, you must have a system. Going in asking for one practice won't get you accepted most time on any EQIP application unless they got an abundance amount of funds. You must consider a system. And I'm not saying put down practice just to put down practices, but put down those practices that's going to benefit you in your operation and help make you a better farmer and a producer up on that land. And when it comes down to grazing land, all of these practices that we're looking at here must be considered. We've already talked about prescribed grazing. In order to have a great pasture, you must have to have some type of watering system, whether that be a pond or whether that be a watering facility of some type. Lost something. I thought something else was going to come up there. The other thing you have, if you're grazing in forest land, forest land improvement, fiber rates, prescribed burning, silvopasture, site prep and tree planting is some of the things you might consider if you're doing that. And forest management plan also is very important. I'm missing something here. When it comes to forestry advice, you must really go and consider a professional to get assistance available from a variety of sources. Several sources offer a free technical assistance. It takes a long time to heal a mistake. So conservation programs can help with that expense. I missed something. Okay. Here again, when we started out, we saw this. We saw that we had Ralph and Rhonda and a farmer sitting down looking at the pastures, and they was talking about the different programs, environmental quality incentive program, the assistance that's available through it. And the other program is the conservation stewardship program, which is not available today, but the one that you must really get on and start thinking about today is the environmental quality incentive program. The environmental quality incentive program deadline is December the 18th of 2020, which is this coming Friday. If you consider it needs some fencing, a pond, whatever the case may be, you don't have to just practices you need, but at least make the application to your local office by this deadline of December the 18th, this coming Friday. Okay. And the EQIP process, again, the producer must contact the NRCS office, and I'll go one further than that. The producer must make an application. And in making that application, the deadline now is December the 18th of 2020. In that case, you need to make an application with the office, whether you have that plan or you didn't identify the resource concerns right now. We don't want you to miss that deadline of getting that application in. So as a result, after you make that application, you still have opportunity to identify the resource concerns on that particular farm. As a result, as a UAPB consultant, I will come to your farm and help you do that. And I will be providing my phone number as well as all my information and email at the end of this presentation to let you know, and I will come out and help you with that standpoint. The one thing we want to stress, make sure you get that EQIP application in, and we will help you get the information they need to determine what practice you need later. You must show proof of control of the land in making that application. You must complete an EQIP application. Establish a customer record with the FSA office. In other words, in order to apply for EQIP, you must have a USDA farm number and be in the USDA system. If you got a problem with that and you don't have a farm number or you're not in the USDA system so that you can make that application, after I provide you with my information at the end of this presentation, please call me. I will assist you in trying to help you get that done. Eligibility for program assistance must be evaluated. And these two things is pretty sensible. One is that you have to fill out a form called adjusted gross income, and basically all that form states is that you don't make more than $900,000. And if you make more than that for the last 2 crop years, they will not fund your application because you're not eligible in that case. The other thing is you have to fill out a form called AD 1026 that says you're not converting a wetland or some highly erodible land and bringing it in production through the USDA system. And I will help you complete all these forms if you need help. Your application be ranked with everyone else that applies for that particular, whether it be pasture land or whether it be whatever the practice may be that you're applying for in a ranking pool. With that ranking, they will determine who get eligible for the funding. And basically the way this system works is whoever has the highest points based on their ranking, depending on the pool of monies that it is being funded out of, they will fund every application they can until they run out of funds. And that's why it goes back to what I said earlier when I stated that going into the office and asking for a fence, and that only as a practice, more than likely will not get you accepted into the Environmental Quality Incentive Program or EQIP program as we know it. The main reason because you will not receive enough ranking points to rank high enough to be funded. They will run out of funds probably before they get to your application. So it's very important to put in some type of system to address your needs. If your application is funded and pulled from the ranking pool to be pre-approved, at that time they will develop you a conservation contract or EQIP contract. And you will have a schedule that must be followed. Now, when I say you have a schedule that must be followed, you determine that schedule. You determine when you want to install each one of those practices on that particular contract. The only requirement is that you install one practice within the first 12 months of the contract. Then you have the right to schedule the time and year and months that you want to install each one of those practices. And as a result, that is the schedule they said, and you must follow the schedule that is determined. All practice must be completed according to the NRCS standards and specs. You just heard David speak about the posts on a fence. They will give you the standards and specs. You're expected to install those practices according to NRCS standards and specs in order to receive those payments. If you do not install those practices according to NRCS standards and specs, you will not be receiving any payments until those corrections are made. NRCS will pay a flat payment rate for each practice that will be installed. Complete installation of the practices must occur before the payment. Now, that is very important. Even whether you're hiring someone out to do the work or whether you're doing it yourself, NRCS will not pay the flat payment rate for that particular practice until that practice is installed according to NRCS standards and specs. Once that practice is installed, at that time, you will receive the flat rate of the payment. There are some caveats to that. As a social disadvantaged, historic underserved farmer or beginning farm or rancher, you have the opportunity under your contract to get up to half the payment up front of a particular practice that you install. It's called an advance payment. And I must stress right here that this is something you shouldn't take lightly, because once you obtain that advance payment, they expect you to be started and purchase materials to start implementing that particular practice, and then within 90 days be complete with the installation of that practice. But it does help a great deal. If you don't have the funds to start purchasing the material, if you can get half the money up front, it does help a great deal in getting a practice installed. But you must complete it within 90 days. Well, say, well, Val, what does that mean? We got our pasture, what are all these people standing up here? This was what we call a livestock grazing school. A number of people go out and they teach them about the things about rotational grazing, showing the difference in the management and showing what kind of efficiency can be obtained by rotational grazing. This is another practice that's out there, and you do get paid part of the system in the rotational grazing plan for going to some of the grazing schools. Most of them are hosted by conservation districts and other agents to provide education activities that promote good stewardship practice, and mainly, when I speak of that, the rotational grazing system, I think what they're saying and looking at, observing at this particular one. That's basically what I have, and I thought I'd kind of go over some questions, and specifically if you have some ideas on what type of practice you need, if they're available through NRCS. Dr. English and I are still trying to collect pictures to kind of show a number of the different practices that are available. I was not able to include many of them into this particular presentation, but again, my name is Lavelle Foots. I'm the UAPB Small Farm Consultant. My number is 870-692-7535, and my email is fulltime3128@gmail.com. I will be happy to come to your farm and help identify the different conservation practices that you may have a need to address your concerns on your farm, that NRCS can provide some financial assistance or technical assistance that can help you improve your operations. With that, I'm going to hold off, and if there are any questions, I'll be glad to answer any questions that you have. Are there any?
Does anybody have any questions for Lavelle about any of the conservation practices that you could possibly get for your pasture livestock operations? If you don't have any,
I'm sorry. Okay,
Go
I
ahead.
have one. There used to be I think there was a practice that paid for I guess, sort of a road if a farmer was feeding his cow, and he was driving his tractor out to the field. And that was a practice that would cover, a road once it rained and everything, because it get wet and stuff. And I think you could get it. I'm not sure what they used to call that.
Dr. English, that practice you're talking about is access road.
Access road, okay.
And that practice code is 560, if I remember correctly. And as a result, that is a practice. And sometimes you get a lot of static behind that practice. It is still on the cost share system, so it can be paid up on. What the requirements are and what the standards and specs require of it, off the top of my head, I do not remember at this time. But it is a practice, Dr. English, that is still up on the cost share list that you can get payments upon.
Okay.
I got a question. Lavelle, we just talked about the road.
Okay,
Practice 472 says access control.
sure.
Then you got practice 575 that say animal trails and walkways.
Okay.
So is 472 the one that'll put in a road, or is it still, you said 560?
560, I think it's the one for a road.
Okay, all right.
But now, the one you talking about, the animal trails and things, that's a different practice. I haven't seen that one cost shared up on. Are you looking at a cost list, or you just looking at a practice list, Stephanie?
I'm looking at one of these practice sheets.
Okay,
It might be an old one.
okay, that's a different one for me there.
Yeah.
Let me look at the cost list and tell you if it can be paid up on for you. And I will let you know if that can. I have the 2020, of course, the 2021 cost list have not been put out yet, but I do have the 2020 cost list that they use for EQIP that has each other practice that they will pay cost share upon. And I will be able to tell you if it's there or not. Okay. And that's right, this was in the map of order. Stephen, you said the one you had was animal. Do you have a number on that, Stephen, that practice code you were talking about again?
Oh, I'm sorry.
Do you have a number on that?
575, which is animal trails and walkways.
575, okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Okay, Stephen, it's in there.
Is it?
Yes, it is in
Okay,
there.
so what's the difference between access control and, which is 472, and 575, which is trails and walkways?
Okay. Well, I see access control is a specific thing. The access control is like you have a watering facility like a pond, and you don't want the livestock getting on the levee of the pond. They create a access control by fencing off the levee and leaving only an opening for the livestock to walk into the pond in one specific area to drink out that pond. And as a result, they're putting in heavy use area, the whole 9 yards, to control the nutrients that's running into that water. That's what they consider access control. If you have one of those catalogs, you should be able to see that in that little conservation catalog book. On that particular one, that should be one that is in the book there. The other one that you're talking about, the 575, is more like a walkway where you know the cows is going to walk through on normal situations. You can pretty well predict that's where they're going to go. I look at that being a practice that they would protect that particular area, so if the cows walk upon it, it won't cause any erosion of major nutrients from running into a stream or water. You're going to be protecting just that area through that walkway. And I didn't know that they paid up on this the first time anyone have asked about that one, Stephanie. But it is cost share up on it in the system last year.
Great.
I learned some myself right there real quick about them, quickly.
All right, thanks.
Okay.
Any other questions or concerns anybody got out there?
Yeah, Olivia.
Uh-huh.
If there's a, in the pasture, if there's a sort of small stream or, an area that's sort of low running through the pasture, was there a practice that would pay to put in a cover or something there?
Yes.
You could go over that? What was that called? I thought it was something like that.
Okay. There are two practices out there. For instance, if there is a stream or ditch or any type of crossing you have in your pasture and you need a cover in, there's a practice called 587, which is structure for water control, what the name of the practice is. 587. I know, Doc, it seems strange because we also put a flow meter under that practice. I know.
Okay.
But as a result, that is the practice for putting in a basic cover. And that's just to let water run through from one side to the ditch or one side to the stream to the other. On the same token, Doc, that may be a situation where that is a gully or drop off or something like that, and it's causing major erosion. In that case, that practice becomes a grade stabilization structure of 410, which is mainly to stop the erosion or the drop off or the deterioration of that particular stream. It may be, but it's still no more than a covered or a drop inlet being placed in there, and you can still utilize it to go across the stream once that's been installed.
Okay.
Either one of those could address that need. Okay. Some of the ones that most people don't take advantage of when they think about it, again, the rotational grazing. But I think one of the ones that a lot of people are missing out on, especially here in Jefferson County, if you're looking at it, if you can get fly ash, is heavy use area. You don't think about it, but every time you go through a gate and you wall out a hole just going through the gate of the fence, that become a heavy use area. And most times you got a mud pole or you got a hole there, that's an area should be concreted with the practice code 561, which is heavy use area. As well as whenever you feeding around or have a watering tank, you should consider the practice code 561, which is heavy use area on all of your pastures. I think that can benefit you greatly, and rather than seeing your cows go up to take a drink or go up to take a lick off a salt block or something and bogging down every time they do that, to take a weight off their bodies. That's a practice that really many of the farmers need to consider. Unless you're up on a hillside that's not causing that type of problem or issue, they really need to consider the heavy use area practice a lot.
Lavelle, I didn't realize that, at a gate that could be considered heavy use area, but I do see it now that you explained it, they can explain it. But I knew around the water, around the water trough or the watering facility where they were drinking, I knew that, when it rains and stuff, and you get very muddy and out there and you're feeding them, and it could get to be a muddy mess. And I think also, Dr. Fernandez said at one time they could get some diseases or something in their foot.
Exactly.
Walking in that mud and et cetera. So it was
exactly
to have a heavy use area there to prevent a lot of that.
Want to be one of the best ways to address that resource concern or that particular problem is do a heavy use area. And one of the things that while I was DC working here in Jefferson County, we utilized a lot of fly ash because it was so close. That's one of the things, and I found it to be even better than putting SB2 out there in a lot of cases. But that is an excellent practice to address a major need that most farmers don't consider.
And you said SP2. Would you expand on that a little bit?
SP2 is more the little pea gravel or the gravel you put down around that tank. Well, flash is a product, a bulb, or a flash. You get up here from the nuclear deal here. The worst part about that is paying for the hauling, but I've seen it to be one of the best systems to aggress, even better than SB2, because when you put the SB2 on a little pea grab or something, the cow's got rocks or something up under the hoops. But if you put flash down, it's not. You put that stuff out and you wet it, it sets up like concrete, but it's not quite as hard as concrete, so it doesn't affect your livestock hoops as bad.
Okay.
It's a good product.
And could you comment just a little bit on the, I think 591, I call it soil test. It's not soil testing, and the herbaceous weed management, I think.
Okay.
Weed, yeah.
591 is a repair and buffer, I think you're talking about, right?
Well, no, I was thinking about a soil.
you
I was
said
thinking about soil
591.
testing. I was thinking about soil testing. Not
Five-
management. That's not-
591? I'm sorry, I was thinking about 391. You're right.
Yeah.
Let me go down to 591. Make sure.
I'm thinking about nutrient management for pasture.
Amendments, you're looking at amendments for the treatment of agricultural waste on 591.
Okay. No, I
That's
was
what-
thinking about soil testing, and following the recommendations.
Okay. This is one I found the other day, but soil testing is practice code 216. They will pay you to even pull a soil test on your farm. And that practice code for them, it's one I just found this week really on this list. It's unreal what they do pay on sometimes.
So that's 216?
216, I'm going to make sure about that, Doc,
Okay.
right? Yes, it is 216. They pay at two different rates. Let me make sure what they do. Based on the number of soil tests you're taking, if you are a regular farmer and not a social disadvantage, last year they paid $86.93 for a person that was not social disadvantaged. For anyone that is social disadvantaged for each soil test, they will pay $104.32 last year on the cost list.
Wait a minute, that's
Just
extremely.
to do soil testing up on your farm. And that's whether it's pasture or row crop. You can get these soil tests. If you need to pay for them, this is the way to do it.
That seems extremely high, though. You said, is that much? I thought it was $3.87, $3.87 or $5 and something like that for.
That's what NRCS is paying for each one. It's got it by number.
Okay.
Each number of soil tests you present for payment, they are paying $104.32 for social disadvantage. That HU group of people's out there, and for a regular farmer that don't fall in that group, they're paying him or her $86.93 for a soil test.
That means you have to follow recommendations, though. You got to
Right.
test and follow.
Well, the key to it is, on this particular practice, it is a standalone practice. When you pull the soil test and you get the recommendations and you carry that information or provide that information to NRCS to, hey, I pulled my soil sample and I carried it in because that was a practice scheduled in your particular plan. And I'm sure this is one of those things. Normally on a soil test, we said it used to say 5 years they last. Now I think most people want to go with about 3, I think. Is that right,
Right.
Stephen? Okay.
Right.
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah.
So in this case, if you wanted to go out there and take your soil test and carry it in for somebody to do an analysis on it, as long as you had it in that equip plan first and schedule, I want to take X number of soil tests in this year on these fields. You carry them in, you show that you've taken that soil test, you get your analysis back and say, this is what I've done. You carry that in and present it to the EC, they pay you those rates times that number of soil tests you take. Okay.
But
That's
you
what
do have to indicate that you followed those recommendations, though, that you put that.
Yeah, the idea is to get the soil test to follow the recommendations on practice code 590.
Okay.
Nutrient management.
Right. Okay.
That's another program practice that you can get paid up under nutrient management. You get the soil test, and once you have the soil test, then you're going to apply your fertilizer, your lime, or whatever nutrients that soil test recommended. At that time, once you do that, under nutrient management, you'll be paid for applying the fertilizer according to the recommendation under 590, as long as you add that as part of your planning system. or your conservation plan.
Okay. And then there's one practice where they will help you when you are establishing a pasture. Not
Yes,
improving a pasture, but if you are establishing, I think, a pasture, they will help you do that, establish one, I think.
yes, the practice code is 512.
Okay.
It's for forage and biomass planting. Practice code 512. And that is the same practice we would use if we was going to oversee lagoons, some type of clover or some into a pasture.
Okay.
That would be the same practice code we would use. We used to just call it pasture planting. I'm going down to it now to make sure what they're calling it. But I think it's forage and biomass planting, what they call it now. Let me make sure. See what they call it on the cost list last year. There it is there. Yeah, forage and biomass planting, what they call it.
Okay.
For me, it's just old common pasture planting, what we saw on the slide. But they have different rates. If you're gonna plant native species, and of course, if you plant native, they may be great, but they're a little bit more hassle to manage from that standpoint. And also they have warm season grasses, they have cool season grasses. They also have cool season, let me make sure if it's lagoon, do they break it out like that? All they have it is warm season and cool season. Let me make sure. Warm season and cool season grasses. They do. They do. They also have on this list overseeding lagoons,
Okay.
which would fall into your clovers or your vetch or something of that nature.
Okay.
On the cost list. This cost list is humongous when you go in and look at it, and sometimes until you ask and go and look at it to see exactly what they pay on, sometimes you don't know till you take a look. But that's the ideal. If there's any farmer out there has a need, I would strongly recommend you take the opportunity to contact them and see if there's any way they can provide some cost share assistance and some financial assistance to help you get that resource concern addressed or that particular problem on your farm. That's the main thing we're trying to stress here.
And in the chat box, there's one question. It says, I know that EQIP programs now have soil testing. Does it have a program to pay for hay testing?
Ah, that's a good one. I haven't spotted that one on here any place for testing hay. That's a good one.
Yeah, I've never seen anything that indicate that they pay for hay testing.
Right.
That's new to me too.
I haven't seen anything of that nature over here. I have seen where under CSP, it's one of the enhancements that if you're willing to get your hay in your particular crop you're growing, get the nutrients test in it, they pay a certain rate, but not on the actual EQIP program itself.
Okay.
Okay, we're approaching our 10:30 time limit. Karen, we got any extra time? Or are there any more other questions for Lavelle?
I'm gonna this is my last one, Lavelle. On
Okay.
herbaceous, herbaceous weed control.
Uh-huh.
You comment on that for pastors, because I think that's one practice that a lot of people are not taking advantage of, that herbaceous weed control practice. I don't know what the number is.
Okay. The practice code is 315, herbaceous weed control. When you look at the standard, it basically says the herbaceous weed can be controlled a number of ways, including mechanical. That is no more than bush hogging.
Mm-hmm.
But if you're gonna do things like spray a herbicide, they recommend that you get with the extension service or somebody and get a recommendation as you are doing that. Of course, they don't want somebody to put some out there that's gonna be detrimental and kill the wrong grass or kill the wrong product on the pasture. But they recommend you get with some type of specialist or consultant person or somebody to make a recommendation on the herbicides you're gonna spray. Other than that, it's pretty well straightforward, Doc. You're going out to kill a certain weed in your pasture, and I'm gonna call it a weed right now for lack of a better term, and you're gonna either spray, or you gonna bush hog, or you gonna do some means of getting rid of a weed in that pasture to hopefully improve your vegetation for grazing purpose in the future. And as a result, when you complete that particular practice, if you're bush hogging, you're gonna let that DC know that, hey, I've completed my bush hogging, I've completed my practice code 315 herbaceous weed control. This year, all I did was bush hog. If it's in this case, you said that, hey, I've completed my herbaceous weed control, and you're gonna spray specific herbicide, you need to let that DC know up front, because they have to run a program called wind pests. And wind pests show that that particular herbicide is going to be detrimental to the soil or water body or stream or something of that nature. And so as a result, they run that to make sure it shows that there's going to be an environmental detriment occur if you put out that particular one. More than likely there isn't, because when that extension agent or somebody make that recommendation, they're going to be following the labels on the herbicide. But that is something that DC is supposed to do. Doctor, that kind of answer that?
That did. Okay.
Okay.
Let me ask you one other one, and this is my last one, I promise. A lot of people they see ponds in there. I think they see ponds, and a lot of people come in, they want a fish pond. They say, I want a fish pond. Could you expand on that a little bit?
Yes. NRCS would not put in a pond just for the purpose of recreation. The only reason that NRCS will put in a pond is for erosion control within a grazing system, a livestock watering facility within a grazing system. Those are the main two reasons NRCS will install a pond. Now, at the same time, if you put that pond in, and once it's installed and established, and you want to put some fish in it, you want to grow fish in it, that is fine. But the pond, the main purpose for putting in that pond was to address either the erosion control problem that you had there or the livestock watering issues that you was dealing with. But yes, it can have a dual purpose.
Thank you.
Okay.
That'll probably wrap it up for today. It's 10:35 according to my clock. And we want to thank Lavelle and Dr. Fernandez for their presentations. Their information was available, or should be available to you if you put in your, send us your email or your phone number, we can send you their contact information.
And Stephen, I do want to stress again, for anyone here locally in Arkansas that's looking to get some help with the equip practice, I'll be happy to come out to their farm, happy to help identify those conservation practices and work with them through the equip process if they're having some problems getting things done or getting their ranking or figuring out exactly what they need to do. I'll be happy to do it, either via the phone or computer or email farm visit, whatever they need there.
All right. We'll make sure we do that.
Right. Want to thank everyone again for your participation. We just have a couple of announcements. We have our next workshop on January the 11th. It's a Zoom meeting on hemp production. We will have an attorney on there that's a hemp lawyer, I guess you would say that. He's very versed on the hemp rules, and then we'll have someone from the state plant board as well. So this should be a very informative meeting. We also have someone on there that's going to talk about your cultivation practices and some of the right things to do. Then on January the 25th, right in time for taxes, we're going to have a credit counseling workshop where we will have someone on that will talk to you about things that you can do to improve your credit, as well as information about some of the changes in tax laws and stuff like that that you should be aware of before you start filing your taxes. Again, want to thank everyone for coming and participating. This is that holiday season. Don't go crazy. Don't go in debt for one day, because your family and yourself, you're more important than one day. So spread it out. Don't add any additional unnecessary stress for yourself. or your household. Stay safe. Just stay safe. Do some safe practicing. I have family members in Detroit, and I have family members in Georgia. A household of 6 in one place, a household of 5 in another place, and both households are sick with COVID. One as the result of going to church, and the other as a result of their Thanksgiving activities. So I'm not encouraging you I'm not trying to infringe upon your rights or your benefits. By all means, enjoy life, but you should be wise and be a good steward, not only of yourself, but those that you encounter. We just want to practice so we can all get to our next normal. We got to get past this normal. So again, we thank you. Remember January the 11th and January the 25th.
Hello, Miss Karen. Scott Jones made a comment.
Oh, okay, okay. Okay, Scott, Scott said, thanks for bringing that up, Mr. Henry. We can consult on pond fisheries, but it needs ag erosion purposes for financial support, which means that Mr. Scott Jones is there also to assist you. We have a lot of good people that are there with the extension program that can really assist you and help you. Please take advantage of the services that are out there, because you need to. You need the expert. If anything, this COVID thing has shown us that relying upon those who are experts probably would help us benefit a lot, and we wouldn't be probably experiencing some of the things that we are now had we relied upon the experts. So let the people that know what to do come and tell you, and then after that, what you do is going to be up to you, because our job is to provide the information. It is up to you to be a good steward of that information. Thanks again, Scott. So again, Scott is a great resource, great, huge resource, especially when it comes to ponds and keeping those ponds up and keeping them safe and healthy. And I wish more people would talk to him, especially because I'm one that goes fishing and I'm so tired of seeing weeds and stuff like that. So yeah, take advantage of Scott. He's a good one. Okay. All right, well, there are no more questions. Remember, we are here at the University of Arkansas at Pine Bluff. We can get in contact with anyone you need, and we can send them out there to you. This meeting is being recorded, so if you find someone that wants the recording of it, please send us an email and we will get that recording to you. It will take probably about an hour or so at least before it processes, so I can't get it to you right as we end this meeting. Thank you again, and have a very happy, safe holiday season.